Hello? Ah, perfect. Okay, good. All right. I hope you're all well nourished from lunch and properly relaxed because we have a very exciting panel coming up. So this panel is going to be on ethical leadership, balancing innovation and responsibility. The panel will be led by Dylan Kassane from Lab Biotech, and he'll be talking to Pierre Depenou from ImCheck, Paul Allen Dollinger from Sanofi Vaccines, Rémi Drola from Coma Partners, as well as Delphine Guillon-Geline from Uzivax, and lastly, Jonathan Luttmann from Lundbeck. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming along, and thanks to Excellentium for inviting us along. I think it's going to be an interesting panel, and I'm very happy that you're going to get to hear from some lovely people. My name, as was said, is Dylan Kassane. I'm General Manager at La Biotech. We're a biotech and biopharma media here in Europe. We're very international. We're based in Germany. I'm based here in France. I'm Australian. My team is from Bulgaria, Reunion Island. They're in Spain, the UK, Germany, France as well. We cover biotech and biopharma and have done since 2014. Our topic of the day is ethics and ethical leadership in this industry, where those sort of questions come up quite a bit. But before we jump into the questions, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Maybe if I can start with you, Johan.
Okay, thanks a lot. Nice to be here. I'm Johan Luttmann. I'm Swedish by background. I was an academic professor before joining industry way too long time ago. And I got stuck for many years. I'm heading R&D at Lundbeck, which is a mid-sized pharmaceutical company headquartered in Denmark, but globally active. R&D is also globally active. And we're specialized in neuroscience entirely. But I worked in many small and big companies in my career, including being a CEO of a small startup.
Delphine?
I'm Delphine Guillon-Geline. I'm a veterinarian by background. And I've started working in consulting for 10 years, mostly at the Boston Consulting Group in Paris and in London. And then I joined Uzivax 8 years ago, where I'm in charge of the business development and the operation. And Uzivax is a biotech company developing a broad-spectrum vaccine. And our most advanced candidate is in influenza. We're currently in phase 2B.
Hello, so I'm Rémi Drola. I'm a managing partner at Curma Partners, which is a venture capital firm based in Paris. I'm a molecular biologist by training, but I've jumped in the VC industry 27 years ago. So doing investment in biotech in Europe for this time. Curma is active on 2 verticals, therapeutics and health tech verticals. And we invest from really spin-off from academic groups to supporting some companies' IPO or very late stage investments.
Hi. First, I'd like to say it's great to have you in Lyon. Lyon is a very important area for Sanofi. We have 5,000 colleagues here, 5 sites. It's actually, over the past 5 years, the region where we've invested the more in R&D and industrial worldwide. So it's a very important place for us. So I'm a Director General Delegate for the global vaccine activity. We actually have the vaccine headquarters in Lyon, the rest of Sanofi being in Paris. Background, I'm a PharmD, and I also hold a Master's in Management, La Grande École from ESSEC Business School in Paris. 25 years international marketing and commercial operations, and 10 years I would say one word, sort of strategy for the last 10 years. And one final word, I'm actually neurodivergent. The British would say neurospicy. I have dyslexia and an attention disorder. So if I don't answer the questions immediately, you know why. And I actually head for Sanofi worldwide the group AWARE, which is the neurodivergent group where we have 800 colleagues, either concerned or interested for that topic.
Hi everyone, I'm Pierre. I am the former CEO of ImCheck Therapeutics. I am the only non-scientist on this panel. I probably have something in common with many of you. I was a first-time CEO, so there were a lot of questions earlier today when Thierry was sitting exactly here that I absolutely agree with every answer he provided you. So we can come back to that later if you wish, and in a break. So I came from pharma. I've spent about 20 years at Merck, Baxter, Sanofi, international roles, strategy, M&A. Up until that man, Rémi, offered me with another investors to lead, not found, but built and lead ImCheck from its inception about 9 years ago. Well, actually, about 10 years ago now. We started with 3 people, 4 people in an academic lab in Marseille, in the south of France. 4 years of preclinical development, 5 years of clinical development, and we delivered a phase 2/3 ready asset in the space of immuno-oncology. Great data presented at ASCO in the field of AML, which attracted the attention of many pharma and led to the exit in October 2025 and to the closing of the deal in December 2025. So since January, I am no longer the CEO of ImCheck, and I'm chairing boards, participating to a lot of events to help entrepreneurs in biotech, connecting a lot with investors and my colleagues, my friends, and very, very happy to be here and help you in any way we can.
Great. I think we've got a great panel. I'm going to get us started with the first question. It's one that always comes back to the ethics that we have in journalism, which is how to move fast and actually move fast in an ethical way. We're faced with that in journalism all the time. Biotech is faced with that all the time. Pierre, I'm going to start with you. How do we balance moving fast and making money and getting it right?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Obviously, we do not cut corners when we work in biotech, and as you've heard from Thierry earlier, have the honor of trying to save life or help patients and their families. So one of the essential word that we have in a company like ImCheck and in others, as you will hear my colleagues, is quality. So for those of you who will build biotech companies, I encourage you to invest in quality very, very quickly in the function itself, but also in the way. It's not only what you do that's important, it's also how you do it. And it is important for the scientific credibility that you're trying to build, which then drives the ability to attract investors. Investors such as Rémi do not come if the data, the team are not backed with a very solid quality. And pharma. At the end of the mission, at least the one that the investors is giving us, is to attract pharma interest. And I can tell you, pharma do not integrate assets nor teams that have not been fully compliant when it comes to regulatory matters, but also the whole spectrum of quality things.
Johan, if I can pick up on that pharma side there, does pharma ever tell people we wish you were slower, we wish you took more time on that, or is there a bit of pressure to go faster and still cut corners?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I actually like to tell a little bit how I like to run R&D. In certain places, you like to go slow. And why is that? Because, opportunity cost, sunk cost is never financially a problem, but opportunity cost is an enormous problem. Where do you place your money? And a company that, like ours, where we have a portfolio, opportunity cost is my job to avoid. And if you push things very fast through the wrong stages, you can go very far in development. And, we talk about ethics. It's unethical unethical. Unethical is on the way to unethical, right? There's some unethical behavior how you push molecules too fast. And why is that unethical? Because you actually build a lot of hope. And I get a lot of mails and sometimes phone calls from patients. We work in breakthrough areas where there's no treatments, right? They call me, they want to be in our trials. And if we don't think we have enough reason to believe that this will work out, we are unethical. You shouldn't push it that far. It's also not good for your company, your organization. If you push things very far and you kill molecules in phase 3, it's not good for the organization, all the people that built up all this expectation, you're planning launches, you're dragging a whole organization with you. And then, of course, investors, they don't like that either, phase 3 failures. So you have to be moving at the right speed. I have systematically worked with early development, where I actually like us to take time. And we do a lot of phase 1b studies in patients. And I said, work as a biotech, think as a pharma. Meaning, move fast, small patient studies, but be ruthless in killing the molecules, which is something easy to be said in a big company, but not in a biotech when you have to hug your darlings until they're dead, right? So you have to recognize organization come very differently, right? But kill the molecules early. Let the molecules peak in phase 1 and don't let them progress. If you don't get the basics, target engagement, proof of principle, and the doses right.
Remy, what about when it comes to raising money? There's a lot of pressure for people to show early results, to get their data fast, and to present that quickly to an investor to raise that money.
It's true. In biotech, we always operate with financial constraints. So, the cash resources is very difficult to get. And sometimes there is this temptation to say, well, let's oversell some data or some preclinical experiments to try to convince investors and to get money and run to the next phase of development. I think it's very often a very bad bet, because there is a very clear reason why you have a difficulty to raise money at some inflection point where you should be able to raise money, and most of the time is because you have not been able to generate sufficient information on your compound. And I think when it's preclinically, when we are talking about preclinical data, that's of course an issue, and you will pay later on some corner that you have cut. But when it goes to clinical development, meaning starting a phase 2 or including patients with the compounds where you have not been able really to have a clear idea of what kind of efficacy you will get, what kind of tolerability you will have, it becomes problematic in terms of ethical. So I think it's really based on behavior, and we used to work with people we have worked in the past many times. It's a small ecosystem, so I think this kind of behavior where you want to go too fast and not take sufficient time to reassure your investor or physician, it's probably something that you may have to pay at some point.
Paul Allen, those reputations that people build for moving too fast or playing with the data, they follow you forever, right?
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to add, because I fully agree on the fact that you have to fail fast. And in vaccines, until quite recently, we were going the traditional path, preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And in preclinical, you save so many mice, and then in clinical, it doesn't always pan out that way. So over the past years, we've really emphasized setting up translational hubs, and recently we started one in Australia, for instance, because it's very important to go to human very quickly to know if your approach is going to work. Of course, some technologies, we've seen it with mRNA, can allow you to go in a few weeks from a digital sequence to an actual mRNA brand. So you find technologies which can save time. And we've seen with COVID that if you can prove that your vaccine works in one season, and you can see that with COVID, you can do that with flu, then in a matter of a year or year and a half, you have a vaccine. But this is the exception. Even in the vaccine world, it's 5, 7, 10, sometimes 15 years. And yes, we want to accelerate, but in the end, it's still going to stay long. So there are some things you need to look at very early. One example, and I'll finish there, is what substances are you going to use to produce your drug? And of course, we're going to look at regulations and things like that. But 10 years, 15 years down the line, are you sure what you're going to use to manufacture your product will be acceptable, for instance, from an environmental point of view? And so we also look at social media. And in preclinical, we inform the teams both with what is already forbidden, what is at risk, and the things we're hearing to try and see if we can plan ahead. Because even if we want to accelerate, some programs will still take 10 years.
Delphine, what about smaller companies? Is there that pressure to accelerate that maybe in Lundbeck or in Sanofi is just a little bit different?
So of course, we have much more pressure to move fast, cut corners. But at the same time, the reputation is quite important towards our investors, but towards the big pharma as well. Because if we try to oversell some data at some point, they will quickly know from what is coming next that we haven't been fully transparent or fully specific. I think what is quite tricky for small company is also to manage in parallel the various critical aspects of the product. So we've been talking a lot about preclinical, clinical, but the production process, the CMC, we are in biological, is quite tough to manage, to nail down. Sometimes you have a product that is suitable for phase 1, but would require many scale-up adjustments to be phase 2B or phase 3 ready. And as a biotech, it's a big challenge because it's huge investments, sometimes at the same level as the clinical trial you're conducting at the same time. So it is really something that needs to be anticipated and also financially wise.
So, you know, I'm happy that we've got no corner cutters sitting up here on the stage, which is nice. But I'm interested in where this idea of ethics in biotech is actually coming from. In big companies, you can do training, you can have codes of conduct, you can have reinforcement. In small biotechs, it's a little bit different. But where does ethical behavior emerge from in a biotech? Delphine, can I come back to you? Where do you find these ethical people?
So I think it's coming mainly from two things. First of all, with most of us in biotech be trained as a scientist. So it is really something that is embedded in our very first year at school to really let science speak and to hear what science is telling us. I think it's quite important. But sometimes, because you have financial pressure from investor or for other very bad reasons, obviously you can be tempted to cut corners, to remove one arm. And I think what is critical here is to lead by example. In small company, biotechs, we are a very small executive team. So I think we should always keep in mind that ethics and being transparent on our results is critical for our future, for our individual and reputation, but also as a company. So I think it's really the C-suite that should be leading by example, being transparent, being ethic on all the topics, not only on the scientific results, but when we are negotiating any contract to really behave and lead by example on this front.
Johan?
Yeah, it's nice for you to think that we're more ethical than bigger companies. I wouldn't think so, quite frankly. The behaviors are different. And I mentioned this, you know, going to phase 3 with less good data, a consensus mentality, you make decisions and you progress. That's as unethical as anything else, right? So it's the balance of all these things. You raised this important thing about, you know, CMC and, you know, upscaling, you know, a lot of money on the table. We are trying something in Lundbeck that, you know, a few companies are doing it. We try to co-create with small biotechs, sometimes even at C stage. So we do a big bear hug, which investors sometimes don't like, but a big bear hug to help to create that quality even before we have a molecule. And then we travel together on that journey. Then there are exit and milestones that you deal with. So the company can leave that partnership if they want, but they actually exit with something that has sort of all the other forces that a bigger company can add to it. So you add quality to that journey earlier on. And we do that routinely, and it works quite well with some small companies.
Pierre, where does ethics come from in this industry? Who teaches it to you?
Well, I mean, when you've been working in an academic environment where you've been taught that data needs to be traceable and reproducible, which is not often the case, but most of the time the case, then I think you are, it's embedded in your bones. When you're coming from the pharmaceutical industry with a world-class reputation, it's also where you learn. But when you operate a biotech company, it also comes, from the regulators. You don't go with the FDA to the FDA or any other, regulatory agencies with fake data or manipulating curves. And I have seen those. I have seen some of those things.
I think we're seeing one.
I have left a company that was that used to do these kind of things. So, it's a culture that's that's passed from professionals to professionals, and I think that's great that we have all of you in front of us, so that you see that the leaders of the pharma, the investors, and the biotech industry, deeply believes in the quality of what we're doing. As I've heard earlier, you do not dose patients. You don't use patients. You don't dose patients just like that for the pleasure or for the sake of trying to go faster or make money. That doesn't. I mean, in our world, that doesn't make any sense. And for example, as a CEO, and I'm sure Delphine sees that too. I had a CMO, a chief medical officer. Chief medical officer is a doctor with a reputation, who has practiced, who is in front of the regulatory authorities. He's responsible, or pharmacien responsable. Those guys are responsible for a lot of things, including, as I mentioned earlier, quality and quality systems. So if I were to tell the CMO of ImCheck, tell this center to recruit only these kind of patients, because I want to get the results that I need for my investors, my CMO would tell me, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. So that's where it comes from, just to give you a perspective.
What about when you're investing in someone? Is this something you take into account, the reputation of the person? Do you do an ethics check?
Of course. When we hire a new CEO or a new member of an executive team of one of our company, we do a reference check. That's very usual. And we are, at least in Europe, but I think in biotech in general, in a pretty small ecosystem where everybody knows everybody. But when we have a new team member, a new CEO, we spend a lot of time with him. I think when we recruited Pierre, I probably talked to Pierre every day for a couple of months. And what we try to share as a culture is being transparency, sharing bad news immediately. It's much more efficient from business-wise because you can anticipate, you can create some expert groups to address some topic, hiding stuff, trying to think that nobody will discover the missing piece in your development. It has no chance to be transformed into a financial or any success as you can expect. So this is, but creating the trust and transparency, it's an effort. It does not come spontaneously. So you need to discuss with people and to create some business relationship which are based on those values.
Well, Pierre mentioned having someone who is very willing to say no. If you're potentially going to move in the wrong direction or make a bad decision. At Sanofi, are people encouraged to speak up? Are there processes by which they can say, look, this is a wrong decision and I'm going to report it?
Definitely. You mentioned that in large companies we have code of conduct. Actually, our code of conduct is online, so you can go and each take a look at what's in our code of conduct. We have trainings, including for what you just mentioned, i.e. speak up. I actually had my booster shot training on ethics, it so happens 3 or 4 weeks ago. So all those exist. They're nice, but essential, but when you're an 85,000 company, you can't have just the trainings and ethics owned by the LEBI, the legal and ethics department. You really need to have it owned at everywhere. And one quick example, I had for the vaccine part of Sanofi, the risk management process. And this will tie up the speed and the ethics. We take the time at the beginning of every key project to identify what are the risks associated with that project. And we ask the teams to come up with mitigation plans. And we also sometimes add probabilities of success. And this is validated by the Vaccine Executive Committee. And then you get 2 things. First, the teams know they can move. And when those issues happen, they don't need to go back to the executive committee. They can move ahead. So taking a bit of time at the beginning to have the agility of moving forward. Of course, shit happens. Things will happen, and we'll need to go back to exec committee. But at least for part of the risks, the teams are equipped. And on the ethics side, the very useful things is that the risk is shared, known, which means that we're not asking the teams to achieve at all costs. And this is very important. So the risk management is not a responsibility of the legal and ethics team. It's within my function, but I somehow contribute to ensuring that things are at least partly done in an ethical way and that we don't ask too much from our teams.
Yeah, there are many studies on this. Unfortunately, most decent people can behave very unethically in the wrong situation. And there are many studies on this, including war atrocities. People can do bad things if they just have the context of it. So there is no guarantee for anything. In a certain system, certain ethical behaviors thrive, and certain system they are not, right? So you have to build all. I like to build what Pierre and Paul talked about, right? Build on this. You need to build an infrastructure around it, where you have an assumption, a culture that this is how you behave. You need also to have all these systems. It's not just what you do to patients, what you do to your pipeline or whatever, your assets. It's also how you behave against other people, right? You have those systems in some way. The smaller organization is, the more informal it is. The example you talk about having a CMO to sit in that role. I've been in an unfortunate situation where I was looking at a phase 1 molecule that we thought internally probably shouldn't go to man. The risk benefit was not there. And it was a pretty severe side effect, liability. FDA agreed. I left that company. Another person came in, and they took that molecule to man, and a healthy volunteer died. So from that experience, which luckily I could have been close to this, if I just said, let's go somewhere else. They placed that phase 1 in another country than the US. And this is the ethics of geography that I think we need to talk about a little bit, because it's a much broader topic. When I'm head of R&D, I always have the good old days, it's called pharmacovigilance, but the head of patient safety should have a clear line all the way to top management, bypassing me as head of R&D. So if we have a disagreement, I want to push the trial ahead, and she or he says, no, I don't think you should. They have a possibility to override me. I think you have to build in those systems, because head R&D by nature like to push stuff.
I want to pick up on this. You just mentioned pushing a trial to another country, because
Yeah.
this is something we discussed a little bit when we were preparing for the panel. Different countries, of course, have different rules and different ways of setting up trials. Setting a trial up in Europe or in the United States is not the same as setting one up in Australia, for example. Jan, they have different rules down there where I'm from, right?
Yeah, that's why I brought this up. I'm guilty as hell. I placed many phase 1s in Australia, and I know many biotech who's doing that. You have an ethics committee, but you don't have regulatory review, right? That's the old British system that led to the Tegenera catastrophe several years ago, right? Yeah, you shop around sometimes in a company because you don't get the CMC approved by the FDA with biologics, so you go elsewhere, right? There is a balance with this. Sometimes it's okay because you think you have all ducks in a row, but you have to be very careful with these things.
This is very, very important. Down in Australia, our government will speak, I don't speak on behalf of my government, but the Australian government will speak very loudly about the number of clinical trials that they're bringing in and the big pharma investment that's coming in. But the reason it's coming in is because all you have to do is negotiate an ethics committee. You don't have to pass through regulation, you don't have to pass through government review. So companies love coming to Australia, love coming down there. Is this something that we deal with in other companies as well? Maybe at a biotech level, we're not quite pushing through, but you've got to be sure where that trial is.
Actually, we've done clinical trials in Australia because we're in influenza, so it enables us to leverage 2 flu seasons, the northern hemisphere one and the southern one. So programmatically speaking, it's quite convenient. That being said, so it happens that it was not our first in human. It was our 4th and 6th clinical trial. So we already had reviewed from both FDA and European agencies before doing these trials. I don't know if we would have done it for a phase 1, but what I've seen is that we've done everything exactly the same way, from CMC stability. Even though we were not submitting those data to an agency, we've been doing that exactly the same way as if we were running the trial in Europe or in the US. And I think, to build on what Pierre was saying, I think we are operating the same way wherever we conduct the trial. Obviously, sometimes the documents are a bit different, but there is this counterpower. We have a head of CMC, we have our chief medical officer, the CEO, myself as operation. So we're working as a team. So if one of us is not comfortable with something we're about to submit or to do, we always listen to the small voices. But I think it takes time and money to operate this way and to be sure that we are all aligned and on the same page before starting a clinical trial. I think the other thing that we all have in mind, and to build on what you were saying, Johan, is that none of us would want to be faced with a trial where one of the volunteers experience a major safety signal or even worse. So I think it's also deep inside each one of us that nobody wants to take that level of risk, neither for the company, but also for its own conscience.
Can we talk about China for a quick second? Or did you want to?
No, go ahead.
No, because I was at a panel not long ago and I learned something. It was a learning experience for me. And some of you, maybe from China, or many of you may conduct trials in China in the future. And what I learned, it was with Jean-Pierre Laterre, who just sold Biotech to, who was that? Is it Astra? Yeah, to AstraZeneca. He exclusively conducted his phase 1 trial in China. Not one patient in the US, not one patient in Europe, not one patient in Australia. And he was explaining that the Chinese authority are very, very cautious. You're not going to China and because you're going to get a very fast clearance or a faster clearance than in Europe or to the US. But he was explaining that the Chinese authority considered that the phase 1 part of the trial is really still, the kind of the back end of the research part of the plan. So until you get initial safety / efficacy data in human, you're not, you do not have a complete package. While, I think our culture is, you do animal studies and then you're ready to go into the clinic. They kind of consider that the phase 1 part of the trial is, still part of our later stage preclinical, if you want. I encourage you to search, talk and try to decode that kind of messages, because I found it myself very interesting. And I have never considered that ImCheck including any patients from China in our studies. But if I ever become another, a biotech CEO, this is definitely something that I will put on the table, because I found that the concept is interesting. And going back to what we said, let's go to the humans as fast as we can, obviously in a very ethical way. But you might be able to find things to direct your program and to decide to kill earlier by indeed taking that opportunity. But again, it's just, I don't have an opinion. I'm just putting it here on the table.
We also have a code of conduct at cultivate. I think when we talk about ethics, it also goes to personal value. And in this industry, often we look at the development from the biotech or the VC angle, meaning where basically without seeing a patient during the life of a project. And I think the perception change when you start meeting the people you are going to dose with your treatments. And we have done a lot of investment, for instance, in rare disease. And I remember a company that we created in centronuclear myopathies, where we were meeting like in a room 20 patients, all with ventilators, and they were participating to the study knowing that it was not for them. So basically, same in oncology, and we try to also show to our more junior team members that developing a drug, this is also meaning working with different type of stakeholders. It's not only an Excel sheet where you need to reach some milestone and then raise money and do another study. It's also working with a patient association, with academic researcher, clinician who may have different objectives also in the collaboration. And ethical behavior, I think it's also being conscious that you have other stakeholders with other interests, other objectives, other values, and you need to make sure that everybody is satisfied by the way you develop the company and the product.
May I build on this? I think this is an extremely important point that you raise here. You can spend a lifetime in a pharmaceutical company, biotech industry, and never meet the patient. It's so sad, right? Some of us have medical backgrounds, so we may vaguely remember what we did once. I always put this in system, and I think what you talk about here is one way to do it. In my company now, we have mandatory patient ad boards to all the studies we do. We meet and sit down with the patients and ask them, will this work for you? We often change our protocols based on patient input. The experts, the clinical experts, they don't know what the patients really want many times. The high academic experts, the famous names, but they don't really get the patient perspective. They're also far away from the patients. So you need to do that, and we have patient insight events regularly. We invite patients to talk about the diseases, so you personalize it, because then you understand they're human beings you're dealing with, and how different they are, each of them in their thinking, the background, etc. So it's a super important aspect to bring the patient voice in.
So we're talking a lot about the ethics that come at the beginning when we make these investments. We do this preclinical work, the clinical work, making sure the data is right. I want to move us a little bit further in that development and cycle. Imagine we've got a drug, we've got through tests, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, looks fantastic. We've done our trials in Australia, we've done it in Eastern Europe. We're ready to release the drug, and where do we take it? We take it to America, because that's where the money is. There are plenty of patients and plenty of money to be made. What about those people in Australia, in Hungary, in Czech Republic, who were the guinea pigs, the participants in the trial, who now suddenly have no access to that drug until eventually we get to the new market?
You can also include France, meaning
Yeah.
I think today any innovative drug is available in the US 2-3 years before it is in Europe. I think for most of, not all the indication, but most of the indication for sure. And the market is clearly in the US. We have this MFN discussion with, well, it's not a discussion, but this kind of consideration which is raised. And I think the European culture, where actually we still have healthcare as a very strong pillar, we need to really revisit our vision of investment in drug discovery, drug development, innovative therapies, and it's a very society choice to make those drugs available to our patients. So for sure, in Europe, we have it's a political decision. In some countries, it goes more to the responsibility of the pharma or to make the drug available. In the rare disease space, there were this decision by a lot of pharma who are active in rare disease to just give for free some medication in rare disease in some countries where people were not could not afford to pay for it. I'm not saying that it can be a duplicate to all type of indication, but I think, as you said, there is more and more it has to be probably raised as a concern to make sure that this access to innovative therapy is shared.
Yeah, maybe a few figures. If we look at US versus Europe, do we have anybody here from the US? From the EU? Quite a few. Asia? Okay. And all the other regions? Okay, no. Let's stay on the US versus Europe example. Our figures is 19 months for the patient to access innovation in Europe, 4 months in the US. Okay. Now, if you drill down a little bit in Europe, you'll see that Germany, for instance, is 2 months, whereas France is 18, 19 months. And why the difference? Is it because we submit differently in the US, France, or Germany? No, especially France and Germany. You know, it's an EU registration process. But it's then the systems are different within each country. So I think I wouldn't say that we submit our files in every country exactly at the same time, but we do try and go globally. We do prioritize the US because the US funds our future innovation. And this is the big discussion with most favored nation, etc. Currently, over 50% of innovation worldwide is funded just by the US. So if we want to keep innovating, but we need the innovation recognized. But if we come back to France and Germany, 18, 19 months in France, 2 or 3 months in Germany, 40% of innovative drugs not even launched in France, 10% in Germany. And the prices in France are 30% below that of Germany. So we're not even speaking of the US or China or Japan or other countries. So, and this is not a Sanofi decision. This is the systems that decide that way. Is it ethical? Is it fair? It's at least an economical/political decision that some countries take. For instance, in France, they'll consider clinical efficacy, not always. They'll consider economic value, but they won't attach any importance to social benefits and quality of life, whereas the US or Germany will factor that in. One example, 5-6 years ago, we launched a flu vaccine. First time in 60 years, there's a flu vaccine 25% more effective than the current vaccine to prevent hospitalization. Germany, innovation is recognized. US, innovation is recognized. France, recognized for 2 years. After 2 years, let's discuss again. And it said, okay, we don't recognize it anymore. So we're going to price it at the same level as standard flu. Now, the flu vaccine, which was 25% more effective, was 4 times more dosed. So pricing it at the price of the regular flu was just putting it at cost of goods. So for the first time, and I must admit I never thought I would see it happen in my company, we said, sorry, but we just cannot. So we withdrew our product. And a year later, they knocked on our door and they said, 25% more efficacy. When we have a serious epidemic, this is thousands of hospitalizations saved. And the most important thing for an elderly person is to keep him out of the hospital. So they came back to us and said, look, could we have another look at your file? In the end, we didn't obtain exactly the price that we wanted, but we obtained something which recognized we have value. So is it unethical? Is it unfair? I'm not the one making those decisions. Those are government decisions. But they definitely have budgetary and political considerations. And my last point is they're not only shooting themselves in the foot in economic terms, in benefits to patients, etc. They're also shooting the whole system in the foot, because if innovation is not recognized, then future innovation is not funded. So,
Pierre, do we owe something to the people who participate in these trials, that we keep giving them medicines afterwards, that we don't just treat them as part of the system?
Yeah, well, we've been confronted with that when we sold to Ipsen. There were a number of patients that we at ImCheck would have probably stopped the trial because we had basically reached the point that we wanted, that we were asked to reach with the protocol, while a pharma, and I'm not making a general point here because everybody may have a different approach and opinion, but in this case, Ipsen decided to continue kind of the trial because they would learn more. That's a very interesting question. Once we've learned what we had to learn from the trial, then we move fast. And we go, and our plan was to move from a phase 1 straight to a phase 3 and a seamless phase 2/3 trial, which the FDA also gave us the breakthrough designation. So we had a great drug. We had a spectacular, rate of complete responses in this AML. And we had learned what we needed to learn, and we had to move on. Well, Ipsen came in and they said, sure, we're going to continue, obviously, the phase 2/3 approach, but we're still going to continue to recruit patients in the phase 1. Why? Well, because they wanted to learn more from the patients, because they have the cash and the time, which fuels back to the earlier conversation. It's not unethical to stop a trial when you've reached a point, but it's also ethical, to pursue. So, but it's just the two models that are different.
Johan, is it unethical to stop treating patients who got through phase 3 and just need the help?
Yeah, this is an extremely complex issue. I mean, I unfortunately have been sitting in many, even at the development level, saying that we're not running the trial in Europe. And it's Europe always, because we cannot get the money back. So why should we bother European patients for it? Sometimes you say, well, that's where we can get the patients. So it's always these conversations you have. Of many drugs I've been involved in taking to the market, we are actively, probably half of the drugs said we're not bringing the drug to the US, to Europe. That's the sad fact, because the requirements are higher. The only medicine against that is to have breakthrough innovation, really high end. But as the story that you just told, it's no guarantee to get the price in France, right? So not even if you're at the higher end of medical innovation, you can guarantee that Europe is going to be. Are you actually getting more and more pessimistic about Europe? The most favored nation, that's MFN. For those that don't know this is Trump thing that he's pushing, his administration is pushing. It's supported by Democrats and Republicans alike. So this is coming. And they have reference countries. Japan is one of those, and my little honorable country I'm coming from, Denmark, is one of those. So the prices of Denmark are abysmal. We have big pharma in Denmark. Is it ethical of the governments not to pay for the medicines, right? That's another conversation to be had, right? Well, you may say that these drugs eventually will come to everyone. They will become generic one day. Some of them are still very high priced, the gene therapies or whatever, antibodies. But there is some, at the end of the spectra, some democracy in this, because the generics company usually go broader, right? So eventually drugs are there. But if you're dealing with, say, NICE, the pricing agency in the UK, and they say the cost benefit is not there. I've been there with a drug for many years, an MS drug, and at the end, the MS Society was pushing so hard, so they approved it. But that needed patient engagement. Another drug with NICE, we got it approved for reimbursement when it became generic. Then they saw the equation go together, right? So I think Europe carries a lot of burden from the government sides also, what they're hit by. The pricing, market access, as we call it, getting the price right in different markets. If you, from European side, say we need a comparison to standard of care, that's another big arm in the study, too expensive. We just don't do it because it carries also a big risk, right? So I've done this routinely, avoiding Europe, unfortunately.
I'm going to turn now we're talking stakeholders of governments and pharma companies and biotechs and industry. Certainly the media, we have a big vested interest in you guys making drugs so that I can talk about it and sell advertising against it. But I think it might be worthwhile to talk to the people in the room, open it up for some Q&A. So I see a few hands. I don't know what's the best way to manage this?
We have mics.
Perfect.
Everybody speaks at the same time.
Thank you for the great discussion. This is Noor. I'm from Algeria. I'm based in Dublin. But I'm a data scientist, so I focus a lot on the AI element in biotech. And was wondering, since there's prevalence, of AI in drug discovery and it's been used, I was wondering what are the probable ethical risks that leadership is still underestimating clinical development and, patient engagement as well. Just curious about that.
Can I start again, because this is my favorite? I have to struggle with this because, quite frankly, leadership in companies go out and say AI is going to change the business entirely. And particularly the blue chip companies went out and talked about this. I think they're a little more quiet now because they realize our business is not that easy. Molecules don't have caregivers. AI works as a charm in drug discovery. Finding small molecules is so much faster today than it was just a year back. We're not bragging about the size of our libraries anymore in pharma. The 10 to the 19th theoretical number of molecules out there. No one has that library, right? So AI is delivering great in discovery. Clinical trials, well, patients have caregivers. They get sick. They have comorbidities. AI is going to change some areas there, but it's going to take a long, long time to change that. To say that clinical trials will go much faster in the future, that is unethical because the technology is not there, because there are so many other factors. Some things will go faster, generating regulatory documents, etc., but it's going to be a slow journey, and it's still patients that we're dealing with. Yeah, he had a follow-up, I guess.
No, thank you so much for the response. But also, because the EU AI Act is coming up, new effective date for the 2nd of August, 2026. I was wondering, how do you manage also that kind of risk with regulation in the EU context? I'm not sure if it's a big consideration with the new AI EU Act.
I'm not sure. Does it fall into anybody's? Might not fall into everybody's responsibility.
No, at the level of a biotech company like us, we've been using AI for in a translational space, for example. How to read, patient samples and data. At this level, there is nothing. No ethical concerns, if you wish, related to AI. But beyond this, generating molecules and is probably okay. But then I'm not familiar with the EU Act and all the things. So he can respond to that, but I can't. Good question, I guess.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I'm from the U.S. My question is about the general perception of the biotech and the pharmaceutical industry and how it often is seen quite negatively by the general public. And how can we show the ethical nature and the goodwill of the people that are actually in this industry to the general public, and what have been the strategies or approaches that you've heard of or that you've applied?
Using examples, that's what I do. I think the negative vibes around the pharmaceutical industry is making money with patients' health. That's basically it, right? Well, when I'm confronted with these kind of questions or remarks, I tell people, do you realize, what happened to, people with diabetes? Do you realize that if you had a young kid, and I have an example in my family, at the age of 10 that is diagnosed with a terrible, devastating oncology, tumor, and then in 90% of the cases you save them. What about breast cancer that obviously, except a few unfortunate cases, has now become closer to a chronic diseases than every woman dying. Did you hear about the publication that was rendered, I think, last week about all the cancers related to the papillomavirus virus that they will be eradicated for men and women? I mean, this is what we do.
I've been dealing with this for so many years. I've been in the industry, and I still can't really grasp what the problem is. If you talk about prices, yes, that's one factor. No one is upset at the private equity owning most of the hospitals in the US today and just closing down, maximizing profit. There's no big issue with that. Pharma companies, yes, the prices of medicine is part of the cost of healthcare, but it's far from the big cost. So why are we the punching bag for this? It's really hard to understand. When it goes really well, it's often academic professors that are out there saying, I did this and that, forgetting that the company put $1 billion behind it, and they were just a KOL in the study. So we're losing the sort of narrative often with this. We don't dare to stand up and really be proud of what we're doing, I think is part of it. And sometimes you see all these nice stories in media, but the reputation is still bad. And I cannot understand it, to be honest. Because all this, what you said, right?
Yeah, maybe a few points. I think it depends who you're talking to. You cannot have one message that fits everybody. I've done a lot of social relations, working within Sanofi with the Employee Works Council, the unions, etc. And I found that talking to them sometimes was a good training to talk, for instance, to the French government or to other. So it depends if we're talking to governments, to lay public, etc. But one thing I would say, when the left-leaning unions would tell me Sanofi is too financially driven, I would say yes. I would say, yeah, we are financially driven. We need to increase our R&D budgets. This can only come from profitability. It's not the government's funding our programs, it's our profitability. And our number one spending in Sanofi is our suppliers. Our number two spending in Sanofi is our employees. Our number three spending in Sanofi is our R&D. Then you have another post, and our number five is dividends for our shareholders, who also help us make the investments, etc. So because in France we hear a lot about the dividend story every year. They participate to the risk of us trying to build successful innovation for patients. But there's a ranking in what we do. This you can have that kind of message with unions, with politicians, etc. I'm not sure it works with lay public. You have to find other issues. And in vaccines, I can tell you, vaccine skepticism is a huge topic. But so I think it depends who you're talking to, and if they're ready to hear that. Yes, we still need a financially driven model, but it's not to pay our shareholders. First our suppliers, then our employees, then R&D, then our industrial, then our shareholders.
And no one is talking about socializing pharmaceutical companies and biotech because it's just not working. Innovation will die very quickly. The big money will not be there, right? So there's no solution doing that. It was actually tried in the 1920s in some countries. Didn't go well. So we have to be a for-profit business to be efficient.
It's a little bit of education as well. We wrote a story a couple of weeks ago looking at the most expensive drugs on the US market, and the prices are enormous. It's 4 million a dose or 6 million a dose. And if that's your headline in the article in the New York Times, then that's atrocious and terrible, and look at these companies. But if you look at the treatment, it's a one-time stem cell treatment for a child who would otherwise cost the health system, $20 million or $30 million in their lifetime. It's a little bit about education. The same whenever you come back and hear about a pill that costs 1 cent to manufacture and how come you're charging so much for it? Well, it's because the second pill costs 1 cent and the first one cost 12 years and $10 billion and so many failed exercises. That education is important.
Yeah, sorry, maybe another example. I was in the Peruvian forest a year and a half ago, and we were coming out of the forest with a group, and the shaman comes to me and says, "You work in vaccines. This is very financially driven, it's very dangerous, etc. And you're only financially driven." And I said, first, I feel hurt. Because I'm part of the management committee, so you're saying that if we're taking bad decisions, I'm part of those decisions. But then I took one example. I said a few years back, we developed a new vaccine for a disease which had no treatment. 60,000 patients in 2 phase 3 studies around the world. 80% efficacy against severe diseases, and there was no treatment. No statistical significant safety signal. Over $1 billion or $1.5 billion development. We had built in Lyon a 350 million euro plant just to produce that vaccine. Millions of patients were waiting for that vaccine around the world. Maybe some of you already, in the words I used, understood that there was something to look at. We were pretty sure that we would get the vaccine on the market. But somebody said, not statistically significant safety signal in 60,000 patients. We're going to offer that vaccines to millions of patients. Is that sufficient? 2 options, launch and see, or reanalyze, get external advice, not just Sanofi, look at the data, and yes, the conclusion was that in a subgroup, the vaccine could lead to some damage. If we had a companion diagnostic, we could get rid of the issue. In the end, it was not a commercial success. We withdrew the product. So I want to work for that kind of company. And this is the story I told this shaman. Say, we accept failure even with something with 80% efficacy and no statistical significant safety signal. But we took the right decision. We never launched it. So please accept the fact that we're not in the movie industry. Okay, maybe some companies are unethical, but in Sanofi, I'm very proud that we took the right decision.
Hi, I'm Sony. I'm originally from India, but based in Germany as a scientist. I have a bit of a different question today. I think you guys discussed in phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, how the decisions can really be ethical or unethical. But from my perspective, I'm quite early in my career. I don't see myself taking those decisions in a long time. So maybe early on in your career, or how do you see ethics at that stage? Maybe your employees, how do you instill this ethical behavior, and in what forms those ethical decisions exist for person who is just starting out as a scientist, as a founder, or yeah.
Maybe just one answer, and maybe speaking as a CEO of Kurma and not as an investor in biotech. I think people start to behave non-ethically when they feel insecure, and it's a question also of trust and the ability to show that failure is part of a journey. Meaning you thinking that you are going to spend the next maybe 35 years of your life in the industry without facing a situation where you will have to report a failure or a mistake. Meaning this is just impossible. So it's very important to create this trust in your environment, to show people that they can share with you some mistakes, some failure, that you can help them to solve the situation. And this is the same as investor or board member of companies. We have been through failures. I heard this morning what is the most the different reasons of failure. I think in the last 27 years, I went through all those possibilities of failures. And at the end, what makes constructive a failure is the fact that you have been able to create some very strong business relationship with people you have failed with. And this is, for me, the best answers to the risk of having someone developing a non-ethical behavior in my company, is just to show the example that we are able to support each other, and we work as a team.
Delphine may have a comment on this as a chief operating officer, because you're in the woods of this, right? But just a comment. Some of you know about the Bad Blood book and Elizabeth Holmes, right? What caused that charade to fall apart? Scientists in the labs. That was a whistleblower, right? So I encourage everyone, if you see something that is not right, call it out. And if management is not listening and you think you're right, you're in the wrong company, and then you have to do something about it. And if it's serious, there are other examples of acquisitions with people making up survival data of transgenic animals, right? Gene therapy. There are bad things happening, and that happens often in the lab, in the very lab where you do some experiments, right? So you have a responsibility already at that level. But, you're in the weeds of, a chief operating officer. You have to find these things, right?
Definitely, I think sharing a culture of transparency, and also to encourage people to speak up. And it's feasible even in a small company. For example, at Osivax, we have a generic address mail, an ombudsman address mail, where anybody can share anything. It can be issues with unethical management of scientific results. It can be something more linked to behavior of someone. And it's this email address gets directly to someone in our board. So someone independent, an independent board member, not one of our investors. And so it's part of our training. They know that every people entering at Osivax, they can use this email address if they have something to notify. So that's really should be the last way of handling things. But I think it's a good mechanism to put in place, even in very small company. You always have a counterpower that is even above the C-level people. And then I think on the day-to-day ways of working, to always encourage people to share results very fast. You were talking about it, Rémi, and I think it's quite important. For good and bad results. Obviously, when we get good results, we're very happy to share with everybody, but I think you should really encourage your team to share bad results as fast as good results, because
Even faster.
even faster. Looking at those results together is very important, because you know what is not working, and it is as important as knowing what is actually working.
So I have, sorry, you can take the next question, but just to add on this, I had, since ethics has to do with philosophy, I had philosophical debates with my own chairman as to whether we must be transparent or honest. Did you think about it?
Yeah,
there's definitely an answer to that question.
Yeah, you know, it's
transparency is good, but it's not good enough.
But to your point, we are all learning in symbiosis, right? The things that people, 99%, if you take a preclinical molecule, the chances of that making it to the market is very slim, right? If you don't harvest that 99% of learnings from what didn't work out, we're losing all the learnings we can, right? So not only be fast and transparent, share it, and often share it publicly, what you have. There's a timing for it, to your point, right? When you share it. I have an anecdote from years back when we had a patient in a phase 1 trial that got full-blown psychosis. With, I can tell it now, a full 5-HT1A agonist. And it was during washout period, and we understand today why that happened. We never published that information. And for years, I walked around and felt really guilty because there were a lot of other companies developing drugs for the same mechanism. No one said anything. No drug progressed. So I think that was something that should have been transparently shared very early.
I entirely agree with that. You know, in cracking our own biology, which was really true pioneering science, I remember having this debate with my team saying, you know, we understand that this doesn't work. You know, isn't that a publication that's as important as, you know, explaining why it works? And I think in some cases we ended up showing at posters some of the experiments that we conducted and the reason why it was not working. That's our contribution to science, honestly. That's important.
Hello. I'm here. I'm Charlotte. I'm French pharmacist by background, and I work in health policy. I have a little question for you regarding the responsibility, and especially the corporate sustainable responsibility. How does your company and your enterprise work on this matter in order to influence maybe also the international level? Thank you.
Well, I can start from the smaller angle with Delphine. We in biotech, you know, have a very strict guidelines and actually end of the year measurements that all our investors impose on us because they have them, and Remy will tell you about his own nightmare. But when you have 14 investors like I had at ImCheck, every year you get 14 lists of questions from, you know, all angles of the governance and you know, social responsibilities and so on, and environmental responsibilities. And it's a huge amount of work. Now, you know, do we genuinely believe in this, or do we just, you know, fill in the questionnaire? I think the honest answer, not the transparent answer, the honest answer is, I'd say 80% of it, we truly believe in it. You know, when it comes to wastewater treatments coming out of the lab, when it comes to environmental matters, when it comes to social matters, all of this at the level of a small biotech company is deeply embedded into our culture. And when it comes to corporate governance, honestly, we don't have a choice. You know, when you have quality investors, you have a quality governance. You know, I keep talking about quality, but I think that's for me it's a recurrent theme. So it applies to us, small companies.
Yeah, and in a bigger setting, I think you have, you know, the quarterly. I mean, what we have to report quarterly. So you have the sort of passage obligé, the French say, so what you have to do. You have the regulation. You have ambitions like contributing to reducing impact for climate change. I think so. It's a mixture of what is mandated and what does the company believe in, and we are fully aware, for instance, on the environment and the climate topic, that it's an increasingly important topic, not just for the planet, but also for the younger recruits that we're trying to get into Sanofi. So when Sanofi 2 years in a row is ranked in the top 10 most sustainable company worldwide by Time magazine, it's not because we follow just the regulation or the reporting needs. It's also because we believe it's important. We cannot be in the human health activity and not at the same time consider the planetary health impacts, which then circle back to human health. And voilà. So we want to make our contribution to that. So it is very important. I actually handle the CSR, the Sustainability Roadmap for the global vaccine activity. And what I find is that beyond everything I've said around regulation, external expectation, etc., it's really a synergy between top management and the individual and the teams. And we have the directions on CSR given by top management, but we also have so many suggestions which come, bottom up, top down, and it's the combination of both which gives us, for instance, this Time magazine ranking. We encourage people to come forward and make suggestions. Of course, we have budgetary limits and we have to prioritize, but overall, it's a key part. And sorry, I'll just finish with that. To come back to the pricing and innovation evaluation, you have the clinical data, you have the quality of life data, you have the economic data, but you have new criteria coming in post-COVID. And one of the criteria that we're hearing more and more is environmental impact. And for instance, France is looking very seriously as asking us to have the environmental impact. And we've handled with a colleague who's here European discussions. They were always asking for the environmental impact improvement of the technology we were proposing. And there's the sovereignty. So you have clinical, you have quality of life, you have economic, and then you have new criteria. Environment is one of them, but sovereignty is also another one. And a country like France has great rules to reward sovereignty, but when it gets in the committees, they forget about the rule. But it's been voted, and they want to encourage manufacturing in France and things like that. It's great at the political level, but when you get at the administrative level, it disappears. So yeah, CSR is very important.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Athena. I'm a master's student based in the US. So my question is a bit more slightly different. So preventative medicine has the potential to potentially do more good than treating disease after the fact, but the financial incentives still reward treatment over prevention. And I was curious to hear how you weigh that responsibility against the economics.
If I get your question right, I may twist it a little bit then. At the end, it's your scientific and medical opportunities that should drive what you're doing. If we like to heal diseases. Of course, we're in the business trying to do that. But ultimately, we all die for something, right? And to get to healing diseases, that's a long journey. The vaccine guys are probably closest to it. You can't prevent a disease from happening. Maybe we get to prevention in some other areas. I work with migraine prevention. You can prevent migraines with good treatments. Not 100%, but in some patients, yes. But it's the biology that allows you. Sometimes a small incremental symptomatic relief is better than nothing. I guess that's a way to look at it also, right?
Yeah, it's also a matter of politician decision and economical weight, because when you treat, you're treating a very small population. When you prevent, you're preventing in the full population for just a small number of people that will, in my example, actually catch flu. So I think companies are working a lot on treatment. Some company in vaccine, for example, obviously we're working only or mostly in prevention. There are some companies fully dedicated to diagnosis and prevention, but in the end, what will get funded depends a lot of the political context, the plans that are set up in each and every country. For example, when you have a cancer plan that was set up in France and in Europe years ago, they were dedicating some budget pools to prevention, to diagnosis, etc. So I think it's quite beyond what industrials or biotech do. It is quite driven by how many money is invested in each objective.
I think there are many layers to answer your question, and from meaning kind of social conditions, meaning just to get access to a dermatologist in Paris, it takes like a year. So that's by itself a limitation to prevention. But we also cannot always delegate to pharma or to politicians some easy behavior which can prevent all of us from diseases. When you see the GLP-1 bubble with this discussion about obesity and who can benefit or cannot benefit for the treatment, I think there is a bit of hypocrisy behind the discussion where but just to maybe give a more venture capitalist perspective, we have launched a fund which is a health tech fund, which is there to use AI and AI to manage the patient's data or all the data we can get to actually create some new tools to prevent disease or to improve disease management. And I think, but I think the position, our personal behavior vis-à-vis innovative medicines and medicines in general should not be the position of a child asking for some advice for everything in our life, and part of the prevention is also our personal behavior.
If you look at prevention before a therapeutic can be preventive, changing human behavior is extremely hard. Extremely hard. And obesity is a good example.
That type 2 diabetes is a clear.
Yeah. And in the Western world, at least, science is one science, and it's the science you learn at university. I traveled quite a bit to China. I mean, you have the sort of Western-style medicine universities, and you have the traditional Chinese, and both coexist. And I think when you say, it resonates, when you say we can't ask the pharma industry to solve everything, I strongly believe it. We have to be here where we're needed, but we also have to recognize and to connect to your question, that there are other preventative ways that are not necessarily from the medical industry. So I think we have to think things broadly. And governments will have to do it because budgetary constraints are increasing. So they're going to have to put more money on prevention, including drugs and vaccines. But they're going to have to do even more on the non-drug and vaccines. So it's an overall shift that needs to happen.
I think we only have time for one more question, if there's one there. Where the mic is going. Are we on time?
Thank you so much for the great discussion. I'm Jung Min. I work in global regulatory CMC at Amgen in the United States. So I filed clinical trial applications and marketing authorizations to health authorities worldwide. And one thing I found is that different jurisdictions can have very different ways of interpreting risk and evidence in regulatory submissions. So my question for you is, what are we doing to promote global harmonization of ethics and regulatory frameworks?
Oh, gosh.
We'll have to be real quick, sadly.
So you have the central IRBs in the US that help you a little bit. They've been criticized because they're too industry friendly sometimes. They're often owned by private equity, by the way. You have every little hospital having their own ethics committee in some parts of Europe. You try to centralize this. It's like trying to get EU together, right? It's super, super hard. I have trials, phase 1 trials, that I had to wait half a year to get started because they're very uneducated. I'm calling out the country, ethics committee in Finland, that were interfering in things that were not their business, right? So the quality of the ethics committee is also varied tremendously. So how to bring this together? It's a local legislation around it. I don't know how to bring it together, to be honest.
Yeah, you have the example also with pharmacopoeia.
Yeah.
Pharmacopoeia sometimes, and I won't mention any countries, it's not just used for good manufacturing practices, etc. It's also used to protect, back to the sovereignty, which is a key question for many countries, to protect the local industry. So in that situation, it's very difficult to say, let's go for harmonization, because it's a tool for sovereignty.
In Europe now you have sometimes a national, at least, ethics committee for trials, but that's as far as they go.
It's another one of those areas that's just far too complex even for an hour and a half, let alone the last question in this session. I'm sorry. I want to thank all of you for being here, but especially to our panel here. So Pierre, Paul Allen, Delphine, Remy, and Johan, thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you. And thank you, Dylan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, to all of you. So warm applause to you for being here and for answering all of our questions. Quick housekeeping note. So the next on the schedule is IARC. Please all check on the Notion which walking tour you're in, because there's 6 different ones. You're going to be divided based on the dates, but you will be guided by some of us towards IARC, and then we'll all see each other there again. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Huh?
Very nice meeting you.
Yeah, leaving now.